Hello, and welcome to the only tutorial on the internet. I'm showing you my desktop at the moment, don't judge me, but welcome to a video about how to record things. This is something I've thought of for a long while now, that I kind of wanted to put together a sort of comprehensive, all-encompassing thing that shows you how to record and what to use and methods of doing it, and then how to edit some of these things down for gameplay or tutorial purposes, because it can be sort of a mess out there. And having gathered some knowledge over the past few years working both for myself and for Sean, I feel like I have a somewhat grasp of some of these things. So I'm gonna go through Shadowplay for recording your monitor. I'm gonna go through OBS for recording and not streaming in this case. And then I'm gonna take a look at just some recording software for audio. And at the end, we're gonna just check in on Adobe Premiere. So let's get started. Woo! Shadowplay. So first of all, I'm gonna start with Nvidia GeForce Experience Shadowplay, which is just the best name that just rolls right off your tongue, isn't it? But the good thing about this is that it's free. It comes with any Nvidia card. It's compatible with any Nvidia card. So if you do have an Nvidia card, you can just go download it and you will make an account for some reason and sign in. And this is what you'll be met with, depending on what games you have installed. I think these are all the games that are optimized for the GeForce experience. I'm not too sure, but we don't care about this. We don't want to, who cares? We want drivers. So make sure that you do have the latest drivers, and you'll see a little green thing up in the corner here that says Open In-Game Overlay. I think by default, this is set to Alt-Q, so I'm gonna hit Alt-Q on my keyboard, and it'll bring up the Nvidia Shadowplay overlay. And here you'll have your instant replay, your record, and your broadcast live. I've never used this for broadcasting, and I'm not gonna go through the settings for this, but let's take a look at the recording options for this. So we have instant replay and we have record. Instant replay means that if you turn it on, your computer will continuously record the past 5 minutes, or however long you choose to set this little slider thing here. And anything that happened beyond those 5 minutes will just get deleted. This way, you don't have to record for hours and hours and hours in hopes of something cool happening in your game, but you can just choose to save the past 5 minutes. Then you have the quality settings, which are the same for the instant replay as for the recording itself. And you have the presets for low, medium, and high. High preset for some reason is 50 megabit per second, which I don't think you'd ever actually need. I recommend sticking between 30 and 40 because it's a huge leap from medium to high, as you can see here. My custom one is set to 40. In-game resolution at 60 FPS. You can choose to capture your gameplay or your footage at whatever resolution you want. For example, if you do have a 4K monitor and you don't want to capture a 4K video, you can have Nvidia Shadowplay just down-res it for you, and it'll be easier to deal with in editing. I would recommend 60 FPS, however. Most YouTube videos that you are probably going to be watching in terms of Let's Play content will probably be around 20 megabit or less when it comes to the actual finished and edited uploaded product on YouTube. Streaming is below 10 usually. So if you stick to between 30 and 40, you're gonna be fine. Basically what this all has to do with is how compressed your image is gonna be at the end of the day. If you have a lot of gradients and subtle color changes, or lots of dark points with maybe fog or mist, then the lower you go, the more artifacting, the more pixelations you're gonna see in those gradients. So between 30 and 40, you'll be fine. I do recommend turning off as many things as possible. No mic and no cam, because we are gonna record these separately, which I'm gonna get to in a minute. You have the settings. You can set it up to connect to your various accounts. You can turn on and off the HUD elements, such as the camera if you are streaming, FPS counter, viewers, and comments. The status indicator is the only thing that's on by default. It's this little green symbol that'll appear in your lower right-hand corner when you are recording, to symbolize that you are in fact recording. Keyboard shortcuts, blah blah blah. We don't care about that. Who cares? This is all the stuff we understand already. Privacy control, however, is off by default. What this means is that when it's off and you are playing a game, Shadowplay will attempt to find your game and record only your game and nothing else. However, if you do this and your game closes down or crashes or you quit the game without stopping the recording first, you do risk losing the footage or corrupting the file. Shadowplay has gotten better with this, and now it seems like it will try to finalize the file no matter what, but I have had issues myself where a game has crashed or I just plumb forgot to stop the recording. I just quit the game and oh, well, there goes that file. So, I would probably recommend keeping the privacy mode turned on, or the privacy control turned, I don't know which is on or off. Green! Because that means it'll record the entire screen instead. However, there's a lot of caveats here. Keep up. When you do this, and you are playing a game in full screen mode, I know that Sean has had issues with this where sometimes, not for every game, and not consistently, but sometimes, Shadowplay will intermittently throughout the entire video, sometimes every minute, sometimes every other minute, sometimes 10 times a second, flash the very, very first frame of the capture. Usually the game menu, or maybe sometimes just a black screen. There's no rhyme or reason to it, it'll just flicker on and off the very, very first frame of the capture. I would recommend, if you are using Shadowplay, to play a game in borderless window or window mode, and if you are specifically capturing gameplay, to turn this off and see first if Shadowplay detects the game. The only problem I've had with that is once when I was playing a game full screen, I was tabbing out of the game for some reason, and when I tabbed back in, I kept playing the game, the recording kept going as if nothing had happened, but when I checked the footage back, at the point of tabbing out, the image had frozen. The audio kept going, the file was full length, but there was just a frozen static image for the rest of the video. But when you have all that set up to your liking, you can just hit your shortcut command, which is Alt F10 in my case, because I set it up to be, and you'll see a recording has started, and a little tiny green dot in the bottom right-hand corner indicating that you are actually recording. This is the only indication, however, that you will ever have of anything being recorded, which makes it kind of hard to actually monitor. In its defense, however, Shadowplay runs wholly on the GPU and not on the CPU, so if you are using Shadowplay to record your games, there is a way less likelihood of introducing lag due to capturing video. A lot of the time when you are recording a game, the game itself can run just fine until you start recording because, well, your computer has to do multiple things at once suddenly, and that can introduce lag in the game. Shadowplay is definitely, hands down, the least taxing thing for your computer that I've ever tried. And since it is free, feel free to try it out. OBS. Next up on our list is my favorite piece of software, OBS. Now this won't be what your OBS looks like when you install a fresh one, because I've changed some of the panels around just to keep it sort of compressed and concise and take up as little screen real estate as possible. But if you want to mess around with this yourself, if you go up to View, Docs, the lock UI is checked by default. If you uncheck that, you can now just drag around all these panels and structure the whole thing as you want. You can undock them, have them floating free. You can put that one up there if you feel like, and maybe this one off to the side. I don't know why you would do that. That looks horrible and it's so messy. Who taught you? But when you are happy with your setup, you just go back into the docs and lock the UI, and there you go. If you are planning to record with OBS rather than stream, I would recommend making a new scene collection. As you can see, I have all my streaming stuff here, my notifications, my little borders, and all my scenes. Obviously, I would not want this in a recording because the recording isn't a live interactivity kind of thing. So I've made a new scene collection just called Record, where everything is gone except for the game capture and my camera. Now let's check out some settings, baby. I have a few things changed in here as per my liking, but the only thing you need to look at is the video and the output in this case. So let me go to video first, and you can see that my base canvas resolution is 1920 by 1080, and my FPS value is 60 FPS. The canvas size is this window. Whatever you put in here, the whole screen is 1920 by 1080. If you do want to downscale this, you can do that. Say for example, if you have a canvas that is larger, my monitor in this case is 2560x1440, I might want to make the canvas that big, but I might not want to record stuff that large. So I can downscale it to another resolution if I so choose, but I don't personally use this for anything because we are going to edit this footage later anyway. Moving on to the output tab, if you set your mode to advanced, this is what you'll see. The first tab is streaming, and we're not going to really go through this in this video, but just keep in mind that the audio track is set to 1. Jumping over to the recording tab, you can see that my audio tracks for this is set to not 1, but 2 and 3. Keep this in mind. Other than that, you have your usual, the recording path, the recording format. MP4 is usually compatible with any editing software, which is why I use it. Even though it comes with a nice little warning here, thanks a lot, OBS, don't make me paranoid or nothing. When it comes to quality, you could do CBR. I've started using this more and more lately because I've found it more reliable. CBR stands for constant bit rate, and if you set this to 20,000, that is the equivalent of 20 megabit in Shadowplay that I talked about earlier. However, CQP is also a viable option, and I've found that this is a little bit less taxing for your computer. Here is where OBS has a flaw in comparison to Shadowplay. Because OBS runs on your CPU rather than your GPU, using OBS can introduce lag if your computer cannot keep up and spare the extra CPU power needed to actually run OBS. But if you do want to try CQP, I do recommend a quality setting of something between 16 and 18. The lower you go, the better the quality, but going below 15 is going to be very intense on your computer, and it's not really going to matter in terms of quality output at the end of the day. So take a look at these settings if you do want to try them out for yourself. Going back to the audio tracks, however, 2 and 3 for the recording portion, and 1 for the streaming portion. The reason I do this 1, 2, 3 audio track setup is if we go back to our OBS main window and I right click the mixer, if I go into advanced audio properties, you're gonna see the same audio tracks show up on the side. Wow! Now notice that for number 1, everything is checked. This is my streaming track, remember? Everything is going out to the stream. The desktop audio, the mic, the Vive if I'm using that, which, well, I have another mic for that now, so it doesn't really matter. The desktop audio and the mic is what we're going to look at here. However, for the recording portion, desktop audio is only active on track 2. The mic is not. And vice versa for track 3. Meaning that when we are recording, we'll get one video file with 2 audio tracks. One of the audio tracks will contain the gameplay audio, but no mic, and one of the audio tracks will contain just the mic and no gameplay. That way we can change the levels and edit our audio in Premiere, in this case, later on to make things sound as good as possible, and we don't have everything baked into one audio track with no possibility to change individual volume levels. The last method of recording through OBS that I'm gonna mention is a way of getting everything at once, all through OBS, but still separate. Game, facecam, and mic. To do this, I would recommend you create a new profile so that you don't mess with any settings that you might use for streaming or recording normal gameplay without a facecam. But you'll notice when I click this, it's gonna go super flat and wide. This is because I'm now recording an ultra-wide video. If I go back into my settings and my video output, you can see that I'm no longer at 1920 1080, I'm at 2800 1080. So this means that I can fit a 1920 1080 game right here and still have space next to it to put my face cam. I'll show you what this looks like when we get into Premiere in a second, but keep in mind that this does require a pretty powerful computer because you are making a pretty big video file and you are recording gameplay and a camera and a mic track all separate. Audio. When it comes to recording your audio, your microphone, separately in a standalone software, I think most people that I know probably use Adobe Audition because it comes with the Adobe package, but that does mean that it does cost money, and you definitely don't need this. I think most people probably start out with Audacity. I, for sure, used Audacity for years, and it's a great program. It does everything you need it to do. It records, it has noise cancellation, it has equalizers, it has compression, and compression means that you bring the quiet parts of an audio track up and the loud parts of an audio track down, so that it creates a more even listening experience for the viewers. It doesn't have all of the features that Audition has, obviously, but it's definitely capable, and you definitely don't need anything else. So if you want to stick to free things, Shadowplay, OBS, and Audacity, all free, all perfectly viable. Premiere! Welcome to Adobe Premiere Pro CC 2019. This is what you'll be met with. Well, actually, no, this is not what this is what you'll be met with. But I've changed some of the panels around because, shut up, this is what I do. Leave me alone. Down here you can see that I have 3 files imported. This is what I'd be met with when I'm editing for Sean, for example. And this is using Shadowplay to record the gameplay, OBS to record the face cam, and Audition to record the voice. And this is what you'll get, 3 standalone files. If I drag the gameplay file into my composition, this is just some test footage that I prepared earlier, much like a cooking show. Wow! In my case, since I chose to record at in-game resolution, this does mean that my gameplay footage is 1440p, and I do want my video to be 1080, so I'm gonna go to my main sequence and right-click it, choose Sequence Settings, and just go and change this back down to 1920 1080. I'm gonna hit OK, and it's gonna crop the video a bit. This is fine. We just need to scale down our actual footage to fit. If you are using 2560 1440 footage, 75% is a 1080 fit. So once we have our footage, I'm gonna drop in my face cam. Now this camera was recorded through OBS, and this is why you'll see 2 audio tracks versus the 1 for the Shadowplay footage. In this case, I turned off the gameplay audio, the desktop audio in OBS, because I knew that I was capturing my gameplay separately anyway. So I only have the microphone in OBS here, but nothing on track 1. So I'm gonna select all of it and right click and hit unlink. You can also select all of it and hit Ctrl L on your keyboard and it'll do the same thing. In this case, I'm just gonna delete the top track because it's empty and we have our gameplay audio over here. Look at me go, what a beaut. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the camera and the audio again, and I'm gonna nest it. Right click, nest. Now what this does for you is that you can always double click your face cam and go back into the unedited footage. So if I'm out in the main composition and I've already edited my video, I have a bunch of cuts, there's footage missing, for some reason this one is maybe over there, and all of these are here. Now you're gonna see that there's a jump here, obviously, because I removed footage. And if I wanna go back and color correct this, or I'm not happy with the framing, I can always go back into the face cam nest and, for example, add a curve to the footage. And if I drop this on, I can like add some, add some brightness into it, maybe some contrast, and just make it look however I want it to. And if I then go back out into my main sequence, this is gonna apply to all of the face cam cuts that you've done because it's inside of the nest. So now we have our face cam ready to go. I'm gonna drop in my voice track, and you're gonna see that this doesn't line up perfectly because, well, it's a wholly different file. We recorded this completely separate from everything else, so we're gonna have to sync this up manually. Usually what I would do is look at the waveform, and you can sort of easily see where I'm doing something here, I'm saying something, and you can just zoom in and line up the waveforms. It's never gonna be pixel perfect because of the frame rate and the sample rate of the audio. Whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as you're within a frame and you can get it as close as possible, you're gonna be fine. So that's all you need to do to sync up the audio when you are also using OBS to record your mic as a reference. But I am gonna delete this because we don't want to use it. I am just interested in the standalone mic track that I have done post-processing on, and this is another reason for recording your mic track separately. Most people, if not all people, do post-process their audio, which means that they apply noise cancellation, equalizers, compression that I mentioned before of evening the audio out, all these things. And this is also why audio usually sounds different when it's a live stream versus a recording, because you just can't easily do the same things live as you can in a third-party standalone audio processing software. I will, however, show you one more method of syncing up audio to a facecam that has its own audio track for reference. This is, I don't know, it's just some footage that I found online somewhere. As you can see, the mic is down here, you have it all post-processed and ready to go, and up here you have the mic track from the camera. So if I select both of these at the same time and I right-click, I can hit synchronize. Now Adobe Premiere is gonna ask us, what the hell do you want to synchronize, man? And I'm gonna be like, audio, dog. And I'm gonna select track, well, there's only one track to sync from, but I'm gonna select track 1, which means this track. I'm gonna hit OK. Premiere is gonna think for a while, and then you're gonna see the mic track jumping forwards to line up with the camera's mic track. Bam, right there. Now, as you can see, even Adobe doesn't get this spot on. I would personally have put it maybe there, which is why I prefer to do this manually. But it does work if you wanna like get a ballpark. One thing you might notice, however, is that even though we're on point at the very beginning of the video, the longer the video goes on, the more your mic can get out of sync, again because of the sample rates and the refresh rates of cameras and audio. So if I go to the very end of the video, you can see that, oh, suddenly we're a few frames out of sync again. This is very common. This happens basically every video, every time. Everything has slight drift when you do these kinds of things. But when it's down to like, this is only about 5 frames, it's fine. You can just hit R if you're using Premiere and grab the end of the clip and stretch it. So if we line it up by stretching it, you can see that maybe around there. Nah, I like it there. Right now, this clip, the mic track, has been stretched 99.99%. It's pretty close to 100. I think it's probably more 9s over there because it's what, 5 frames over the course of probably an hour. So no one's gonna ever notice, it's gonna be fine, and you're gonna be on sync, back on track, ready to rock and or roll. If you do have larger amounts of desync though, you might have to cut the mic track and move it up to line up with your picture again, and then sort of hide that with a crossfade or a jump cut or something else. But in essence, that is how you sync up a mic track with a video track. So going back in here, we have my face cam, we have my mic track synced up and ready to go. I'm gonna drag and drop it onto the gameplay, and now we wanna sync up the gameplay with the mic track. So first, I wanna position the face cam where it needs to go. You can do this by applying a crop effect, which, well, it crops the video. You can crop it a little bit on the right side, a little bit on the bottom, you scale it down, and you position it wherever you want it to be. I have a bunch of presets over here that I've made manually and saved off, so if I just take a facecam preset and drop it onto the footage, it's gonna do all those things for me. When you have things set up the way you want it to, you can click each individual attribute that you want to save, or hit Ctrl A to select everything, and then you can right-click and choose Save Preset. And then you can just call it whatever you want, and when you drag that preset back onto your footage, it's just gonna do the same thing every time. So if you know that you're gonna use the same settings, make a preset. You're gonna save a bunch of time. So, to line up our actual gameplay footage with the face cam, I'd want to look at where I'm doing the sync. So let's see what I'm talking about. Game capture. Right there I say game capture, so I'm gonna move the game over to start right at that point. However, you can never trust the capture to start right when you click the button and say the words. So this is why we do sync first. So we go down, down, up, up. You can see that it's way off sync. Click. So if I zoom in here, you can sort of see these little waveforms of the clicking noises of the menu. I want to put this clicky noise over where I go down. So I'm just going to grab both of them and move it over right there. And now, down, down, up, up, down, up, down, up. It's in sync. We're ready to rock and roll. I would recommend doing this both at the start and at the end of your capture, because you can never really be sure whether the game is gonna drift just like the mic did in the previous example. So now I just want to trim this. I'm gonna hit the C key, which selects the eraser tool out on the edge here. V is the normal selection tool, and C is the cutting tool. I'm gonna hold down Shift so I can cut all of my audio tracks. You can see that the little marker goes really tall there. So I'm gonna click here, and I'm gonna hit V and select everything, delete that, click, and delete again. That just moves everything over to the start of my track. There we go. That should be all synchronized up and all fine. And now we're ready to play our video games. So you can see that I do another sync at the very end. Up, up, down, down. It's spot on. So we can cut again and delete all this and keep the rest, because that's obviously trash and this is just pure gold. The last thing I like to do before I actually start editing is to normalize the gameplay audio. So let's right click the game and unlink this as well. Now I'm going to click the audio track and go to audio gain. Now you can see that the audio gain peak amplitude, the loudest point in this particular clip, because I'm not doing a lot, is way down at -24. So I'm going to boost this by probably, let's say 18. I like to keep my very peaks of the audio somewhere around -5 when it comes to the gameplay footage. But what I want to do is I want to go to my presets again and use this gameplay preset that I've made. Drop it onto the audio and you can see that this is a dynamics processing preset. If I edit it, you can see that it's just a curve based on the voiceover preset that is lifting up the quiet portions of the game and bringing down the loud parts. So for example, footsteps and wind and ambient noise, it's gonna be a little bit louder than it would normally be, but stuff like gunshots and explosions, they're gonna get brought down so that it's just more of an even audio. This enables me to lower the general volume of the entire gameplay without losing all of the quiet sections, just so that, you know, the peaks don't blow out the actual mic track. There we go. That should be all synchronized up and all fine. And now we're ready to play our video games. Look at me playing video games. Aren't I cool? Thanks for watching. That's gonna be the end of this Let's Play. Perfect. What a natural. There you go. Now you have all your footage. Now you can finally start editing it. So this is not an editing tutorial per se, but I'm going to show you a quick hot tip for cutting video quickly. So rather than, again, hitting C and Shift and cutting everything and moving along to where you'd want to continue, for example over here, cutting again, selecting everything, deleting that, clicking, and then deleting, and then adding a transition. Instead of doing all that, for each clip, you can just make a cut where you want to end your current section. And when you hit a point where you want to continue your video, you can just hit Q. And it'll make a cut and bring everything over to your previous cut in the timeline. Likewise, if you want to jump ahead, you can line it up where you want to go and you want to hit W. and it'll do the same thing, but bring everything back to your playhead instead of forward in time. The cool thing about this is that it even retains your transitions. So if you have a crossfade in the audio of the game there, and you cut with W, it's gonna move it over and keep the transition. Even if you've made a custom transition that's like shorter, for example, and you cut over here, it's gonna retain it. Even if you want a smash cut, I would recommend double-clicking the transition and hitting 1. Just do a 1-frame transition. That way you avoid any popping noises or any sort of jarring clicks when the audio shifts from one level to another. So those are my hot tips for quick cuts and spiffy edits. Go forth, young one. Another benefit of using a nested facecam is that you can see over here, there's a lot of dead space in this particular framing, and I'm not quite fond of how that is looking. So if I want to change that, and I've already made a bunch of cuts, or I've already placed my camera where I want it to be, all I have to do is double click it, and I can go back into the default unedited camera and scale it up, let's say 115%. I can move it down so my face is in the center, around there, and then we go back to the game, and there we go. That's a lot better. Now there's no wasted space, everything is nicely framed and tight. Could even bring this in a little bit just to sort of show more of the game. It's all to your taste and liking, but if you keep it in a nest, you can do whatever the hell you want in here, and it's gonna be all within the confines of your box out here. So the last thing I want to show you is, remember the super wide recording we did in OBS with the face cam next to the gameplay? Well, this is what you'll end up with. You'll have a super wide video with your face and your game, and 2 tracks, one for the game and one for the mic. All you really need to do here is to go into your sequence, in this case it's game 2. I'm gonna right click it, go back to the sequence settings, and I'm gonna change this from 2800 back down to 1920. It's gonna say, oh, this is gonna crop the video. That's fine. Now we are back to a normal 16:9 video. So I would have to move the game over so that the face cam goes completely off screen and the game fills up the entire field. In this case, it's 1400 if you're using the exact same measurements. Then I'd want to hold down Alt and drag this video footage to a new track. Bam! This will now be our facecam track. I'm going to reset the settings and you can see, hello, there I go again. Oh, I'm poking in and out. I'm going to flip this gameplay because you'd always want to make sure that your cam is looking in at the game. You'd want to be looking at the gameplay like so and not off screen like so. That doesn't make any sense. So once we've done that, I'm going to hit crop once more. I'm going to drop the crop right on there. I'm going to crop the bottom to maybe around there, and I'm going to crop the right side to maybe there. And then it's all a case of scaling it down and placing it at an appropriate position on your gameplay footage like so. And since everything is recorded through OBS, while this does mean that you have less audio post-processing abilities, this is all gonna be synced and ready to go already.
It's the weather, but I still can't make contact with HQ.
Sorry. And there you go. You're back to where we were before, without having to do all of this bullshit. But with less control, admittedly, since, well, your face cam is smaller, you can't nest it and go back in and do the same thing like I could do here, and you are losing some potential control over some of the audio. It is a viable option, and it is a very all-encompassing option to just get everything done at once. Now the only thing that's left is to export your video. You can hit Control M on your keyboard to bring up the export settings, or you can go to File, Export Media. It'll bring up the same thing. I've made a preset that is based on the YouTube 1080 Full HD that comes with Adobe Premiere. It's basically just some changed numbers and settings, but you can make your own and then just hit the save up here, like with any other filters and effects in Premiere. This is my preset for exporting most Let's Play content. You can see that it's a 1920 1080 60 FPS preset, and it's set to constant bitrate of 16. Remember back at the start, I said that most YouTube videos are below 20. This is what I was talking about. Most of the time I'll do 16 if it's a highly visual fidelity type of games with a lot of gradients and shadows and darkness, like Resident Evil. I would probably bump it to 20. When I've done animations, I've done them at 35, just to sort of make doubly, superly sure that nothing is gonna look compressed and weird. But between 16 and 20 is probably a good way of going about it for YouTube type Let's Play stuff. And then you just choose where to save it and hit export, and you wait for 4,000 years, and then you upload it, and then you get demonetized, and then YouTube doesn't promote it, and then you get sad, and that's it! You've made a Let's Play. Good job. Ooh, yeah, that was a lot of information to take in. I hope you got something out of that. I hope I've structured this video somewhat coherently enough so that you can jump to the Shadowplay section, or the OBS section, or the Premiere section, depending on what you want to know more about. And hopefully this explains somewhat what is needed and what goes into doing these types of videos and this type of content. I hope you learned something, or at the very least got some insight into some of the behind the scenes sort of stuff around all of this. It feels like it's sort of a secret mystery when you are starting out, and I don't think that it should be, so hopefully you learned something. If you did, that's great. That's gonna be it for me, and see you around. Take care.